Namato Ratanatayasa. May I pay homage to Triple Zim, the Buddha, Dhamma, and the Sangha. My respect goes to my parents and my teachers. Hello, good evening, everyone. So, today is Tuesday, the 15th of September 2020. And this is Ajahn Sujan from Varapunya Meditation Center, Aberdeen, Scotland. And as usual, I am here with you tonight, with you all, and share the teachings of the Buddha that we can apply in our day-to-day life. So far, I have been focusing on the theme, ongoing talk on the basis of the first discourse of the Buddha, the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, and try to explain each main teachings of the Buddha and how does these can be applied in our day-to-day life. Hello Yvonne, Gautam, Margaret, Manish, and everyone. Apologies, Gautam, for last night's meditation guidance, and also I'm grateful to hear that some of you have been following and practicing every day and getting a lot of benefit from it. I just got another message from Wolverhampton that he had a COVID-19 and suffered for so many months, was in a hospital and in ventilation, and just recovered from it, and now following the talks and the meditation, which is helping to mentally fit. So I'm very glad to hear that the teachings and the guided meditation I've been doing is helping you all. So again tonight I will be focusing on the theme that we have started a couple of days ago on the right mindfulness. And in terms of the right mindfulness, I have talked on how the mindfulness been translated from the sati, and what are the aspects of it, and how should be practiced. And today, again, on the basis of that, which is the seventh factor of the Eightfold Noble Path, the Samma Sati, the right mindfulness, will be elaborating on that. As we know that the mindfulness or the meditation, mindfulness meditation, has been very famous, and everyone talks about it, and everyone is practicing, whether it is a secular or non-secular or religious based. Doesn't matter whether you are following according to the Buddhist meditation practice or the secular practice. You cannot avoid Buddha's teachings on the mindfulness. And I also mentioned yesterday in that there are two types of a mindfulness. One is the right mindfulness, and another one is a wrong mindfulness. And in Buddha's teachings, or the practice that we practice, is free from the unwholesome or so-called the wrong mindfulness, but it is a right mindfulness. In this section, again, I would like to elaborate on the right mindfulness, that what the mindfulness means, and the characteristics of it. What we need to be developing in the practice of a mindfulness, or the right mindfulness, is that we should develop the mind that able to quickly grasp the object. It's like there is a saying says, strike when the iron is hot. So that is one of the thing that we have to be mindful of when we are practicing a mindfulness meditation. So as soon as the object arises at that moment, we have to hit, or we have to recognize it without delay. We should be able to rush into it without any delay at all. Rushing into that. As soon as the object occurs, you rush to that object and then be mindful of that. And when you are rushing, then again you are forcefully rushing your mind towards that object, and with a great courage. It's like if you are getting late in the office, then you will put all your effort to go to the office with great courage that you can make it. I remember when I was teaching in a health village, every time, and normally I go a little early, but there was one day that I was just a little late, and when I was going there, all the conscience was simply rushing to get to the NHS Aberdeen Health Village, so I can be there. And all my mind was thinking that I shouldn't be late, I should be there before the time starts. And finally I did manage to arrive at before the session starts. So like that, you have a full courage and you're rushing towards the object when you are practicing meditation, so you are able to be mindful of that. And here, when you are rushing to that object or attacking that object as soon as that arises, then there shouldn't be any hesitation, there shouldn't be any analyzing or imagination or any doubts that whether that is or not, or whether it is there or not, or is it true or not. So you're simply there as soon as it arises. But what needs to be mindful that in order to rush into that, your stable mind also should be developed. It's like a crane stands next, just the bank of the river, waiting and waiting and waiting for the fish. And once the crane knows that the fish travels in which speed and around, he would no delay at all strike and catch a fish. So like that. So you're sitting comfortably, or whether you are whether you are walking or whatever you are doing, mindfully doing in one thing at a time. In the very moment when other things arises, you are able to strike it immediately. And that's the moment that sometimes people may have a confusion, or I have got a few people in the past that questioned that what should we do when other objects arises, or what should we do when mind is distracted? Should we stay with our primary object, or should we do both? So in that case, you have to leave the primary object and stay with the secondary object which just arised, so you hit with it. Okay? So that is the first thing that you have to be mindful of. Ability to strike as soon as it arises. A rush, there is no delay at all. You just simply consciously go and make a conscious decision, making a note of it at that very moment without any delay. So this is the first one, and in Pali it is known as a pakhanditawa. So pakhanditawa means rushing towards the object without delay, without hesitation, and there is no opinions and no so-called analyzing at all. So this is the first character that we have to understand and develop. Okay? The second Second thing is that when we are again practicing a right mindfulness, it's like you have a firm grasp on the object. Now, there is no loose grasp. You have a firmly established on the object that has arisen. Yeah? There is no stop and going or loosely holding onto it. When you are loosely holding onto the object, and so that's where normally people struggle, whether should I leave the primary object or should I go to the secondary object. So in that case, leave the primary object and completely hold onto the secondary object that has arisen, which has a very stronger sensation, or which is very stronger and dominant at that time. And this is it's like if you are cutting anything by one hand is holding and then another hand is cutting, so like that. So this is similarly, if you've been living in Asia, and then you have been working in a farm, you would imagine that when you are cutting a rice, when we plant the rice, and after a few months later, the rice been ready to cut. So at that time, in a couple of bunch of rice, you have to hold by right hand or a left hand, and another hand you're holding. It's called it's like a cutting the knife, similar to the knife. You're cutting it. So if you are not holding those rice plants strongly, firmly enough, when you cut, one, you cannot cut completely, and two, if you cut completely, then the rice plants will just fall down. And that is the one thing that we have to remember when we are practicing meditation, that as soon as objects arises, you have to hold that tightly before either you lose the object or either your consciousness is weaker. So you're firmly there, establishing onto the object without delay, without any mistake. Right? So that's the second character, or the development that we have to develop through the practice of meditation. And this is in Pali, it's called upaganhitawa. Yeah? So you're able to be mindful of that, firmly establishing on it. So it's on the surface without missing it. So your mind is at the present moment, at that time, with that object firmly established. So that's the second thing that we have to develop on the practice of a mindfulness meditation. Yeah, so this is the way we do, the way it should be done. It's a right mindfulness. And the third one is called the patharitawa, which means the ability to know that object in its entirety. So its ability to cover the entire object without missing. So here it's like a given simile that you're able to cover an object entirely without missing any. And further, there is a second way, is that ability to know its arising, its remaining, and its fading away. It's called upada, titi, and bhanga. Upada here means the arising at the beginning. So within this upada, as soon as it arises, then the primary object that we are paying attention to, or any other objects that we are paying attention to, we have to leave it and watching, ability to be mindful of this as it arises. And when we are mindful of that, it's become a titi or established for some time or some moments. A mind is there, present, being mindful of that at that moment without any mistake or confusion. An ability to know that bhanga means the fading away. So as soon as it starts to fade away, you know that the object is gradually fading away, and the mind is gradually weakening from that object. And then, as soon as it fades, then again, that's fading of that objects become a cause to arise another object. So that's the second way of knowing the entirety of the object. And the third way is ability to know the beginning, middle, and the end of each sections that happens. In a broad sense, you can take it as, when objects arises, ability to know the beginning of it, and then the second is the middle of it, and then end of it. And this is again, you can apply to the primary object as well, or let's say the breathing practice, or practicing a breathing meditation. You know the beginning of the breath, middle of the breath, and end of the breath. So in a gross level, the beginning of the breath is the nose, started as a nose, as the beginning of it, and the chest as a middle, and end as the abdomen. And this is a beginning, middle, and end of this breath coming in. Whereas when you are breathing out, again, the beginning will be the abdomen folds, chest rises, and then the nose becomes the end. And this is also another way of looking at this knowing or covering the entirety of the object. So this is a beginning, middle, and end. And this is very important actually to develop this awareness of ability to know beginning, middle, and end. It's so beautiful, in fact, that when you know it, gradually as you established on it, it brings such a happiness and joy that and it's also makes you peace for some period of a time, and you will be in that moment of such a joy that I was able to be mindful of it in this way. And this is a moment of a knowing, or sort of noting and observing as it happens. And this noting and observing during this time is not just the object that we are aware of it, but also the consciousness which is aware of the object itself. So there's a continuation is going on with this inability to be noting and observing it firmly in its entirety. There's another simile given, Another simile is given that it's like when you throw a stone on the pond. So one has to be mindful of throwing a stone from the beginning to the end when it touches. At that time, again, your mind is single-minded. You know exactly what's going on, and your concentration is on the object, the stone, and the target. And when you're throwing, again, you don't have to look at the stone, but you are focusing on the target. And in this, you can, think of yourself or recollect your memories whenever you are hitting something. You're not looking at object that you're holding, but you are looking at the target. And yet you can relate to it. You know all the beginning and the end of it. Yeah, so that is the another way of looking at that. The practice, the right practice of a mindfulness meditation is ability to know the beginning, middle, and the end. And with this again, what happens is that when you are able to be mindful of the beginning, middle, and the end, you will be able to understand the conditionality of the objects or sankharas, any conditions, anything that arises with the conditions. So you will be able to reconnect that as soon as one object fades away, that fading away of the objects become a cause to arise the second object. And as soon as the second object arises, that is the cause to complete fading away of the previous object. And the mind is fully zoned in at that moment. So you will be able to see the connection between one to another. And then with that, further on, you will be able to distinguish between the mind and the body. So the knower and knowing, or observer and observed. You will be able to distinguish that. And that basically helping you to differentiate between the consciousness and object that you are observing. And this consciousness then objects become conditioned arising. There won't be a consciousness without an object, and there won't be an object without the consciousness in that way. So it's known as Nama Rupa Paricheta Jnana. So the knowledge that able to distinguish between mind and matter. So basically, nowadays you may have heard, if you have been listening other monks or other teachers on a guidance, and as you develop your meditation, you gradually will be able to distinguish the observer and observed, or a knower and knowing. So this is basically the foundation ground to help us to understand the cause and effect, and as well as understand the two different things are two separate things, not the same thing. And if you go on to the interview about your practice, you will be asked that the first breath and the second breath, is it the same one or a different one? The first breath that you know, is it the first one, or the knower is the second one, like that. So there will be a series of the questions you will be asked to check whether you have understood correctly about this conditionality and the mind and the matter. So this also you will be able to elaborate later as you develop the consciousness, the mindfulness in this way. They call it sati. Yeah? And the last one is called unbroken, this is known as pavatati. So pavatati means the continuous. Pavatati means like a stream of the water. Water as it flows, there is a connection, there's a continuously flowing. There is no gap in between at all. So as a result of that, there is the continuation of the water. And in this way, whatever comes, it just covers through, and there is no space for any other things to skip in. So mindfulness meditation is such that we have to develop in a state that there is a continuation of awareness from one to another. One to another. So that's why mindfulness meditation is not fixing our mind onto any object for a longer period of a time, but ability to be mindful continuously as every other object arises, and continuously ability to be mindful of that. It's like if there is a gap in between one to another object, at that moment there is the ability to the dust can creep in, and then will be full of dusts in between two gaps. But if there is no gaps at all, suppose you're putting two objects together, and if you make even a slightest gap, so dust can get into there and lays. But if there is no gaps in two objects in between, and there is no chance to have any dust at all. So practice of a meditation is like that too. We need to be very mindful of anything every time when it is arising, continuously without any gaps or stops. Because every stops is an opportunity that defilements or kilesas are creeping in. So that's why in a practice of a, let's say, the rising, falling of abdomen, if you've been practicing, there will be extending from rising, falling, touching, rising, falling, touching, and then from the touching again, extend it into other touching parts of the body gradually. And then ability to know that the circle, the entirety of it. And same with the practice of a breathing meditation too. And the first part is aware of the breathing in and breathing out. So you know that the breathing in and breathing out. But after that, you simply, on the basis of the breath, you are knowing other factors of the phenomena. Yeah? So that's why it is known as the training ground. So you'll be training to know along with the breath. Breathing in and breathing out, you know that the entire body is, it's called sabbakaya patisamvedi. So knowing the entire body. And breathing in and breathing out, along with that, you are aware of body making the breath calmer and a calm, or breath making a calmer, or sabbakaya patisamvedi, and also knowing the entire breath itself, and like that. And this is along with the breath. And this is simply to extend ability, basically the covering all the potholes may have there, or any gaps may occur where is the possibility of any defilements creeping into us, and as a defilement, which means the hindrances that take away from the practice and defiled us. So these are some of the factors and principles that we have to be mindful of if we are practicing a right mindfulness. So I offer this as a tonight's reflection and guidelines to practice the right mindfulness. And thank you everyone for listening, and may you all be well and happy. And may the Buddha Dhamma Sangha bless you. In a few moments' time, we're going to have a chanting and guided meditation. You're most welcome to join with us. Until then, good night and see you shortly. Thank you.